Everyone good? Excellent, excellent. So this story about the luggage is totally true, and I basically showed up straight from San Francisco in my hoodie, and everyone in the audience were in suits, and I said, well, that's the divide we have between the Valley and Europe. It didn't go down very well. But the thing I wanted to share today is around sort of like this 4-dimensional shift that I've done from the Valley to Europe. I just moved back a year ago, and also being an entrepreneur and becoming a VC. So I want to run through like 17 years in 17 minutes. To kick off, the first sort of filter that I have is as an entrepreneur, and I worked for Uber, Dropbox, and I was an advisor at WhatsApp. And that means that was the lens. That was sort of like the way I started to look at the world. Those were the lessons that I made as an entrepreneur around the team, the product, monetization, and timing. And looking across these like 3 titans of companies, at the team, in a very, very quick sort of 10-second way, I would summarize it as like really comes down to culture. And sort of like how the leaders of the companies, how the founders of the companies and the early employees, they sort of distill that soul of the company that becomes the driving force and the execution momentum that the companies are able to build up. The second thing around the product, it's all about simplicity. I mean, you look at the 3 companies, they were obsessed with the simplicity. WhatsApp's product mantra was no bells, no whistles. Dropbox was always works. And for Uber, as accessible as running water. And this obsession like really went through the whole organization, and people were all behind this mission. On the monetization, the third point, you have on one end of the scale, WhatsApp, they were all about the growth. On the other end of the scale, you have Uber. It's all about the monetization of a service that people were already used to pay for, but just make it even better and cheaper. And Dropbox was in between, where they sort of invented this notion of creating a lot of like 500 million users who are just using the service for their personal use, and then subscribing to the Pro subscription where you got like more features and so on. And then of course the really brilliance is to take that to work as well. And that's one of the things that I think we can all think a lot about, is like services that we use as individuals and we take with us to work as well, like the power of that. And finally, the timing. And I think with all these 3 companies, none of them were first in their field. So it shouldn't hold anybody back from launching something. My other lens is as a venture capital. So I've been at venture capital for a year now. I'm at Balderton Capital. We're based in London. We're an early stage VC. So our check sizes in Series A is around $7 million. But one of the things that means most to me with Balderton is really the number of jobs that our companies, our portfolio companies employ or have. And there's like 11,000 people who are employed by this portfolio of 87 companies that we have. And that was one of the questions I asked myself before coming back here, like, how can I come back and contribute? How can I be part of this? And my sort of high obsession, my passion right now is the notion around startups being the growth engine for European prosperity. So that was one of the questions I asked myself. So what's the state of play? What's going on in Europe? And I think we all have, a notion of, Europe is creating billion-dollar companies at an increasing rate. We may disagree on the slides and the numbers and the companies and so on. I mean, do you include NXP? Do you include Arm with multi-billion-dollar exits? Or do you just take the startups? But I think we would all agree that the opportunity is increasing at a growing rate as well. And back in 2008, I feel that was sort of like the start shot where people, they said, you know what? The economy sucks. The house prices are falling through the roof. We have Lehman Brothers, all of this stuff. And people really started to say, we got to take action by ourselves here. And at the same time, what happened was, of course, the launch of the iPhone and the launch of Android in the US. So, and this created this whole wave, this momentum of startup, which we hadn't seen before. So you look around Europe now, I think we would, again, all agree, Europe has like these hubs of knowledge and really sort of companies in different areas, in different in London it's maybe fintech, in Helsinki it used to be gaming, now it's like completely exploded and it's a lot more than that. But we have these hubs of knowledge that are creating and building momentum with people that we hire and the sort of the skills that are accumulated. And that's really important, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. And one of the things people often ask me, so what's the difference between Europe and the Valley? I mean, what's the opportunity in Europe compared to the Valley? And I mean, on a very, very crude level, there are 3 million people in the Valley, with 500 million people in Europe, plus minus. But a much more important thing is if you start to look at the number of startups. And, if you do a quick link on PitchBook and you look at, since 2010, how many startups were funded by VCs? And it's about 1,600 in the Valley. If you look at Europe, it's about 4,000 over the same amount of time. And again, this is like at less than $5 million in funding. So, so it's like, roughly 1 to 2. But if you just take London, Berlin, Paris, and Stockholm, it corresponds to about the same size, the same number of companies that were funded by VCs at under $5 million. So the opportunity in Europe is simply huge. I've taken, over the last year, it's been 101 flights. I mean, I've been to every single hub, and the big difference in Europe, of course, as a VC, is you go to the companies, not like in the Valley where companies come to you. And there's this density in the Valley. I mean, there's an hour from San Jose to San Francisco, right? Just to put it into perspective. But there's this density, there's this gravitational force. Think about the sun and the gravitational force of the sun. That's going on in the Valley right now. And it builds up this momentum, this energy, and you feel it. I mean, we feel it here, right? Walk the floors, the energy is here. And this is happening everywhere in Europe, but around these different hubs that I was mentioning before. And that's building up more and more and more. And one of the things around Europe is it's cool to be an entrepreneur now. So had you asked me 8 years ago, I think most of us would agree to this. If you were an entrepreneur, you were, if you had your startup, you were like a little bit the odd one. That's no longer the case now. So anywhere you go in Europe, any university, and people, they have a startup idea. From Budapest to Barcelona to Berlin, people are launching global companies. So it's been socially accepted now. And I would have argued back then that would have been the hardest thing to overcome. This notion of, hey, let's start something up. Let's throw ourselves in and not be afraid of failing. And even today, more extreme, in the US, they celebrate failings and people share their lessons, like through conferences like Failcon and so on. We're starting to see that here. It's very inspiring. The other notion is, being an operator, being an entrepreneur to becoming a VC. Like, what's the difference? I think it's a path a lot of people will walk to, this of being an entrepreneur themselves and starting to invest. And the first one is just as an entrepreneur, as a startup, as a CEO, as a founder, as anyone in a startup. You're thinking about today, you're thinking about the bombs, the landmines that are right in front of you, and you're thinking about today and tomorrow. You're not thinking about years and years down the line. You don't have that luxury. You're hopefully working in a direction that can take you for years and years down the line, but it's all about now. It's all about the stuff we're dealing with now. As a VC, it's much more the long game. You're thinking about sort of what's happening socially, what's happening politically, what's happening technology trends and so on. You try to take sort of a very big perspective. So complete contrast there. The other one is, we get the tunnel vision as entrepreneurs. I think we all recognize that we know everything about a particular subject. Everyone who operates in that, we know what's going on. We're obsessed with this particular subject. We'll have this tunnel vision. And as a VC, it's completely the opposite again. And, you think high level, you think about, okay, who are all the people playing in this area, etc. You really try to take a step back again. And finally, when I was working at these companies, I was doing strategic alliances, I was doing partnerships, trying to partner up with somebody that was bigger than yourself and use their weight to really accelerate the growth, etc. I was doing all the sort of the non-organic growth. And that means you're very opportunistic. You really try to make things happen. And as a VC, you're sort of, you have to say no a lot. And that's, that's hard. But you do have to focus. And, coming back here now, again, having seen all these different hubs in Europe, my personal focus is going to be Scandinavia. And part of that is simply, I think we would all agree as well, the evolution that's happening here. The companies that are building on top of each other, the momentum that is building up, and the opportunity is just growing bigger and bigger. We're starting to see more and more companies in the billion-dollar range. People are no longer satisfied with, I'm going to do $100 million exit. People are starting to think, I want to go for $1 billion now. So it's like get this mentality of, I want to do something that's even bigger now. And it starts not to become about the money. It's really about doing something big, something great, but winning, really dominating globally. And on a sector focus, I'm obsessed with mobile. I've been working in mobile since the beginning pretty much. And mobile is one of those things, I think, and the irony of being here in Helsinki, I think the mobile phone that Steve Jobs launched in 2007, to me, I think about it like the raindrop. If you think about how nature has shaped water traveling through air, it's a raindrop. It's the perfect shape. It's the perfect shape for friction, to eliminate friction. And it's almost like the iPhone that was launched back then. It was just so perfect that the incremental upgrades that were made since then were like smaller and smaller. They did such a good job. But things are completely going to change. When we're here 8 years from now, it's going to be something completely different that we talk about. Different form factor. So there will always be opportunity in that. And I think in Scandinavia, we're very well positioned for that, with our obsession with design, simplicity, etc. And then the second one is the autonomous vehicles. Probably from my background with Uber, I saw this is an existential threat to $1 trillion industry. How often does that happen? And in Europe, we have just the same knowledge and engineering backgrounds that are needed. We have the big companies where this is their life. This is their bread and butter. If they don't have an answer to this problem within the next 10 years, they're going to be eliminated. We're talking about GDPs being eliminated here. There's a lot at stake. So I think that's a very exciting area that we'll see a lot more of. I think it's real. On the mobile side, sort of when you think about the evolution of that as well, messaging, there will always be another messaging client. There will be another Snapchat. And not only that, but there are going to be companies that are worth more than the messaging clients that they live on as well. So they live within the messaging clients. We're starting to see that in China now. And there are going to be more companies that are bigger than the surface that they build on. In the same way that we have apps that live on the mobile networks that are worth more than the mobile networks, right? Snapchat is a good example of that more recently, while the infrastructures are like investing in making sure we can actually make the phone calls and the data. So I like to call out sort of another trend that I'm seeing. So I'm pointing out to Dubsmash, a European messaging client. One of the guys there, he's a Valley guy, and he's come from the Valley to Europe. And this is another thing that's happening. I love this theme of Valley veterans. It means Europeans aspiring to go to the Valley, they set up shop, and they come back years later. And I sort of normally joke that it's sort of like an 8-year period. It's about the time it takes for 2 Olympics, and you're ready to basically come back and really feed like this, the community here with the experiences and with the network that you have. And in some cases, people come back with, dollar bills as well and become angels and start to fuel this ecosystem as well. That means it's easier to get access at the lower stages at the early stages to start up your company. And it's sort of like it's part of this self-fulfilling prophecy. And the other thing we see is like a new wave of tech mafia. So that means we start to see derivatives of the first generation of companies that we saw start up here. And people are now starting up new companies from that. Spotify being a good example. I mean, gaming in Helsinki, another example. But we're seeing it everywhere. But there's one problem. The exits happen in the US. And many people would disagree with me on that, but it's reality, it's what's happening. If we look at, the FTSE 100 and look at what are the companies, the tech companies that are within the FTSE 100, and we compare that to what we see in the US, we're still very, very early stage there. And we can do a lot more than what we're doing. And one of the things I think we can do is like encourage M&A activity. And how do you do that? I mean, I have this theory, personal theory, that Facebook could not have bought WhatsApp for the amount that they did unless they had bought Instagram beforehand. And I think part of it was just, you gotta sort of like push this pain membrane out. So $1 billion acquisition of Instagram felt like a lot at the time, I'm sure. I think we felt it was really a lot for very few people. But look at how the service has just contributed to Facebook value today, and the interaction, how people touching the service every single day in one form or another. But even more importantly, it opened up this door to be okay with paying, close to $20 billion to buy WhatsApp, 50 people company, 50 people startup. And vice versa as well, probably for WhatsApp, they saw, hey, Facebook, they bought Instagram, they left them on their own, they kept working on their mission, the product kept continuing, and they were like a standalone company within this enormous pool of people. And WhatsApp thought, cool, we can do that too. So, to wrap up, I feel this is digital Darwinism. It's inevitable that Europe will have these billion-dollar exits at an increasing rate, as we're seeing in the US. It's cool to be an entrepreneur. It's accepted, it's socially accepted. I mean, when I called my mom and said I was joining a taxi company, she thought I was out of my mind. But it's socially accepted now to be an entrepreneur everywhere. We have this momentum building up with people coming back and experience building up. We have the tech mafias building up as well, the experience from working in a company and starting up and not do the same mistakes you did before. And the exits will happen here as well. So I feel Europe's moment has come. And the responsibility is for us as well here in this room, this green stage, for all of us. Look, if we want our kids to live in a better Europe than today, in a better world even, I do feel startups are the growth engine for European prosperity and even global engine. I'd like to thank you for that.